Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Today, it's just me, a solo episode of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir. Austin Davidson, my typical co-host, is unfortunately not able to join me today. He has to study for a few tests that he is taking this week. A rather unfortunate timing for the Pittsburgh Steelers to have their only Thursday night game of the season. But that is life, and he's still in school, so I certainly don't miss that. And boy, I certainly don't miss having to cram for tests and having to organize my schedule and life around school. It can be quite a headache, obviously, as I'm sure most everybody is aware. That's just the way it is. But Week 9 of the NFL season came to a conclusion Monday night. Two teams coming off the bye. The Dallas Cowboys just could not match the energy and the efficiency of the Tennessee Titans. Both teams, as I mentioned, coming off the bye. Titans just a lot smoother than the Cowboys. Cruised to a 28-14 victory. Marcus Mariota playing some better football than we've seen of him as of late. Both teams have been rather unimpressive this season. I had originally picked the Cowboys to win the game, but it was clear that was just because I was very low on the Titans. It was not a very pretty matchup, and I still don't think very highly of either team. One team that I had been pretty high on that I actually did pick against this past week, and that pick came to fruition, the Washington Redskins. They've had quite a difficult last few days. Not only did they lose to the Atlanta Falcons at home, they also suffered some pretty serious injuries on the offensive front. They lost off two guards, Brandon Schriff and Sean Luavo, along with wide receiver Paul Richardson. All of them lost for the season to injuries. They were all starters. So the Redskins, which were already a defensive-minded team, lost some key players on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know how that bodes for them going forward, but if it weakens an already relatively weak offense, you have to think that going forward, the Eagles should be able to relatively close in on the gap that the Redskins have on them right now. That division is about as wide open as it gets right now, even with the Cowboys playing as badly as they are. The Giants are out of it, but no one's really making any sort of separation in that division right now. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. The Saints have been active in free agency, or rather, as far as the wide receiver position goes, they brought in some players to be worked out, including Brandon Marshall, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, who was released earlier this year, Kamar Aiken, who was previously with the Eagles, Ravens as well. They also brought in Dez Bryant, who they signed to a one-year deal today, as a matter of fact. So Dez Bryant is going to the New Orleans Saints to try to win a Super Bowl and get his name back on the map. Bryant, who was drafted in 2010 with the Dallas Cowboys, kind of rose to prominence for a couple years. In 2012, at his first breakout season, 3 straight years of 12-plus touchdowns and 1,200-plus receiving yards. And then starting in 2015, Bryant's career really kind of tailed off. It was really that controversial Dez Bryant catch play against the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. Ever since then, he just wasn't the same kind of player that he had been previously. And he still put up some decent numbers, but at the end of the day, he clearly was not the impactful player that he had been. The Cowboys parted ways with him, and I'd never been a huge believer in him in the first place. So I'm not quite sure how this is going to pan out for the Saints, but you look at their room right now, it's basically Michael Thomas and not a whole lot else at wide receiver. So I'm not saying he's going to be a huge impact or going to have a big impact right away, but if I'm the Saints, maybe he's a bit of a head case, but at the same time, he might have also been humbled a bit by the fact that he hasn't signed anywhere or played anywhere since the end of last season either. So I think that this is a good move for the Saints, and a relatively cheap price too to bring in Bryant. You get a guy that has produced before, and you'll see where it goes from there. As far as Steelers news goes, the ongoing Le'Veon Bell saga continued. He sent out a tweet the other day that said, "Farewell, Miami," and a lot of people jumped to, he's coming back to Pittsburgh right away. And, Austin and I have been firm believers of, until he walks into the team facility, we don't care what anyone else reports. It's just a matter of, we'll believe it when we see it. Reports have been, though, that he is apparently up to see the Michigan State and Ohio State college football game this weekend with his family, and that he plans to report to the team on Tuesday, so this upcoming Tuesday, which would be the 13th, and then he plans on coming to the team then, and then kind of going from there. Reports have also surfaced that he's intending to sit out for the season too, so again, it's just, it comes full circle. I don't know what to believe. So until I know for a fact that he's there and that he's with the team, I'm not interested in just hearing what other people think, but time will tell. The injury report for the Steelers and Panthers game. Before we get into that, I'll just kind of analyze it a bit for you. Typically, teams get 3 days to practice if they're playing on Sunday. They'll get Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for practice designations. Were they a full participant, a limited participant, or did they not participate at all? And the Steelers and Panthers had to just project kind of what they thought it would be like if they practiced, because they can't practice Monday, the day after a game, and they have a game on Thursday, obviously. So they're kind of against it right now. So this is the NFL's way of having 3 days of an injury report. I don't think it makes much sense, but regardless, here is how it stacks up. For Pittsburgh, wide receiver Ryan Switzer has an ankle injury. He was limited on Monday, designated limited on Monday and Tuesday as well, but he's expected to play. Backup nose tackle Daniel McCullers with an ankle injury practiced in limited participation on Monday is what the designation was, but he did not practice Tuesday, so I wouldn't be surprised that if he doesn't play. Offensive tackle Marcus Gilbert was listed as a did not practice Monday and Tuesday, so expect Gilbert to miss his third straight game. And then Panthers, they had a few injuries of their own. Defensive end Mario Addison had a shoulder injury. Captain Munnerlin, cornerback with a groin injury. Cam Newton with a right shoulder injury. Greg Olsen with his ongoing foot injury. And Eric Reed were all limited on Monday and Tuesday, but are expected to play. Center Ryan Khalil with an ankle injury. Linebacker David Mayo with a groin injury. And wide receiver Torrey Smith did not participate on Monday or Tuesday. So, Steelers and Panthers, out of conference foes, they haven't played each other a whole lot, the Panthers being a relatively new franchise in the scope of the NFL. They came into the league the same time the Jaguars did. I believe it was 1995 or 1996. The Steelers have faced the Panthers a total of 6 times in their team's history. The Steelers hold a 5-1 advantage, with the last result being a 37-19 win for the Steelers on Sunday Night Football in Carolina. I remember that game very well. The Steelers cruised to victory on the backs of Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount, who both rushed for, I believe, over 100 yards on the day. Antonio Brown scored 2 touchdowns. The Panthers won the first meeting, and the Steelers have won all 5 since. The first meeting came in 1996, before my co-host Austin was even born, so it's been quite a long time. And another fun fact, the last time the Steelers hosted the Panthers in a football game, it was also a Thursday night game. The Steelers won over the Jimmy Clausen-led Panthers 27-3. The Panthers finished with the worst record in the league that year, thus leading to their first overall pick of Cam Newton, who is now their quarterback still. Panthers play a lot of preseason games in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh plays in Carolina a lot, but Newton probably does not play much in Pittsburgh during those games because it's typically the 4th preseason game. So this will be the Steelers' first chance to kind of get a look at him in Pittsburgh since he's been drafted. But let's talk about the Panthers and Steelers. It should be a good football game. Most of the time these Thursday night games are clunkers, games that are relatively boring. This has the potential to be one that's relatively entertaining and exciting for both sides and for the national audience too. It's a game on Fox again. The Steelers have a chance to join all but the New York Giants as far as the home teams that have won Thursday night games. It's not going to be easy though. This Panthers team is certainly the most challenging team the Steelers have faced in a while. Probably since the Chiefs early on in the season. The Ravens did present their challenges, but offensively they just weren't a very good team. The Panthers, they are good on both sides of the ball. They're not elite, but they have good pieces in place on both sides, and they're a balanced football team. And as far as their defense goes, it's definitely not the same kind of juggernaut it was back in the 2015 season when they won the NFC Championship. And they're not as good as the Ravens defense that we saw last week. But they still have a collection of talented defensive players, and they've made a living off of feasting on their opponents' mistakes this year. The defensive line, headlined by Mario Addison, who is on the injury report, but he has 7.5 sacks this season. He's been by far their most productive pass rusher. And the Steelers need to make sure that he is blocked, and they have to take care of the football in this game. Although they finished with 0 turnovers last week against the Ravens defense, you can make the argument there should have been at least 3 on the final drive of the first half alone. That drive was a dumpster fire. They've got to be ready to go again. As far as the Panthers defense goes, the first player everyone's going to recognize besides Addison is most likely Luke Kuechly, the linebacker. He's been one of the best inside backers in the league for years now. He's made 5 straight Pro Bowls. He's a multiple-time All-Pro. And every one of his full seasons that he's played, he's never had less than 118 tackles. He's basically the prototype for the modern inside linebacker today. Whether it be in run defense, pass coverage, and sometimes even as a pass rusher, he's a difference maker. The Steelers have to make sure that they can account for where he is on the field. Other linebackers, Thomas Davis and Shaq Thompson, have been solid as well. Shaq Thompson especially. Up front, talked about Addison. He's definitely the biggest threat for the Panthers. Austin wanted to point out before that he has been their only consistent pass rushing threat for the season with 7.5 sacks. His health is of vital importance to the Panthers defense because nobody else has more than 2 sacks. If you take away his sacks that he's gotten on the season, the Panthers are near the bottom of the league in sacks for. So he's someone to look out for. If he can't go, the job of the most effective pass rusher probably falls to the future Hall of Famer Julius Peppers. He's still making a bit of an impact, but it's quite clear Peppers is not the player he once was. He's played in a limited fashion this year and has just 9 tackles on the season. The back end of the Panthers defense has a few names as well. You might recognize the free safety Mike Adams. He's been all over the field this year with 52 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 6 passes defensed. New starting strong safety Eric Reed has made quite an impact in just a month with the team. He's racked up 27 tackles. Only being with the Panthers for a month, as I mentioned, it's been a pretty good turnaround for someone that hasn't played in quite a long time. Cornerback Dante Jackson has 4 interceptions this year, so the Panthers haven't statistically been an elite defensive unit, but they have standout players. I mean, they can still get the job done, and they know how to play against good teams. The Steelers need to be patient on offense, and they should strive for balance on the day. Taking care of the football must be top priority. As I mentioned before, the Panthers love to take the football away, and they've been good at it. But you should be able to move the football against them. They put up almost 400 yards. In fact, they had 405 total yards against the Ravens defense before Roethlisberger took that sack on the final offensive play to go under 400 yards. If the Steelers can move the ball against that defense, they should be able to move the ball against the Panthers. Just make sure you take what they give you. Don't force the issue. I want to see more of James Conner again. The last few weeks have been fantastic. This is a big and physical unit, though. Wait for the Panthers to try to get aggressive before you try and burn them over the top. I don't know if the Panthers will try to stack the box. If they do, maybe you try to take advantage of it, but I wouldn't be overly anxious to try to just hit them over the top, be the quick striking offense that we've typically grown to see, although the last few weeks it's been more of a ball control offense. I don't think the offensive line should have a ton of trouble opening up holes and protecting Ben Roethlisberger, given the fact they have had tougher tests as of late. The Panthers have a good rushing defense statistically, but I'm going to poke some holes in there. They have the second fewest rushing attempts against this year, which means teams just aren't running the ball that often against them. I think if the Steelers just pound the ball every now and then, make sure James Conner gets around 20 carries a game, I think that'll be solid for this one. And I already talked about not turning the football over. Roethlisberger just needs to keep doing what he's been doing for the most part of the last few games. Don't lock onto Antonio Brown. Spread the ball around. Take what the Panthers give you. It might be another week of no real deep threat established, but, that's okay. Take what the defense gives you. You can move the ball on them. Just, don't force the issue unless you absolutely have to. If the game situation calls for that. As far as the Steelers' defense goes, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think this is going to go well for the Steelers' defense. The Panthers boast some big matchup problems for the Steelers' defense, and it doesn't help that they're one of the few teams that don't mind pounding the rock a lot in today's air raid NFL. Surprisingly enough, running back Christian McCaffrey has been the lead guy on the ground this year for the Panthers. When he was drafted, many thought McCaffrey was just kind of a specialist who could carry the ball every now and then and was more of a pass-catching threat. But he's proven the experts wrong this year. He's on pace for over 215 carries this year and over 300 touches total. He's a versatile and dangerous weapon for sure. On the outside, the Panthers have a relatively underwhelming cast of receivers, but there's some pedigree too. This includes top receiver Devin Funchess, a former tight end in college at Michigan. He's quietly having a career year. The first receiver taken in this year's draft, DJ Moore, he's looked better the last few weeks. Another prospect that Austin looked at a couple years ago, Curtis Samuel. He's a wide receiver, formerly a running back, but he's used as kind of a gadget play guy. He's dangerous too. And then, of course, who could forget tight end Greg Olsen? He's had nagging foot injuries this year, complications from his injury last season, but he's been effective in limited action this year, and he's long been a favorite target of Cam Newton, and obviously the Steelers have struggled in defending the tight end this season, so that's something to look out for. The Panthers have a big and skilled offensive line. They're a concern and probably the best part of this offense. They make it a specialty of beating up the opposition. And then finally, Cam Newton is just really such an interesting specimen at quarterback. He's kind of a mix of the size and strength of Ben Roethlisberger, but he has speed and the athleticism of someone like Robert Griffin III. And he's parlayed all of those tools into a nice, maybe atypical quarterbacking career. He's not Drew Brees. He's not completing, 80% of his passes. He's not throwing for 5,000 yards. He's, with the exception of his 2015 MVP season, he's not thrown for 30 touchdowns, but he's been very efficient this year. We've seen a different Cam Newton this year than we've typically seen under Norv Turner, the new offensive coordinator. It's been more about efficiency, and a guy that's struggled to have his career completion percentage anywhere close to 65%. This year he's on pace to shatter his old record for completion percentage. He's on pace to finish with less interceptions than he's ever had in a season, and he's far and away having his best season when it comes to passer rating. And not to mention, he's still a dangerous runner with his legs. He's a powerful back. Quarterback back there. When he wants to run with the ball, he can get physical. It's not like, we'll knock out the quarterback. No, Newton's a big guy, and he'll knock you out if you're not careful. So what does this mean for the Steelers defense? Well, like I said, it's going to be one of those days where you kind of just hope you can slow them down long enough for the Steelers to get up by a couple scores, so that way your defense can start pinning their ears back to get after Newton, and they can start to make life difficult for the Panthers offense in that mind. But really, for the Steelers to have an effective day on defense, they have to start with stopping the run. the defensive line, Cam Hayward, Javon Hargrave, Stephon Tuitt, Tyson Alualu, and it looks like LT Walton, they're going to have to be ready to try to stop the run. They need to be ready to gang tackle. The Panthers' ball carriers don't go down easy. Even the little Christian McCaffrey is a bull down there. They need to keep the ground game in check, and I think that the Steelers' chances are a lot better on defense if they can stop the run. Cam Newton's not a guy that's going to throw the ball 50 times in a game and win. But the problem persists because Cam Newton has been protected well by his offensive line this year. The Panthers have given up just 12 sacks on the season, and the Steelers, it's been a very strange season for Keith Butler because I've gone back and forth on my criticism for him. And I think I have a newfound respect for the way he schemes up his blitzes. Kind of going on a tangent here. I think about Keith Butler and the fact that he doesn't really have a premier pass rusher on the team. I know Cam Hayward had 12 sacks last year, but you think about the guys he's had. He's never really had a dynamic guy like James Harrison or LaMarr Woodley in their primes. And yet the Steelers went out and had a team record for sacks last season. That's just incredible. And you think about that, they didn't really get it in the traditional sense. That just tells me that Butler's been so good at being able to get sacks with his schemes, and that just, I don't know. I feel good about the Steelers when it comes to blitzing for the most part, but I feel a little bit differently in this game. Mike Hilton has probably been the Steelers' best or second best defensive back this season. He's been a playmaker since he made the team last season, and he's been good, but I must admit, I'm worried when it comes to Hilton being a blitzer in this game. Typically, he's one of the best blitzers in the game off the edge as a nickelback, but it's one thing to blitz and hit quarterbacks that are 6 foot or 6'2". Cam Newton's like 6'5", 6'6", 250, and he's super fast too. I'm not saying Mike Hilton can't bring him down or anything. I'm just saying I think I'd like my chances of someone like Vince Williams blitzing and trying to sack Cam Newton as opposed to Mike Hilton. I don't know if Hilton's a guy that could blitz and really phase Newton, who's trying to complete a pass down the field on a certain play. And you have to think the Steelers are going to have to scheme a little bit if they want to get pressure. The Panthers' offensive line is just too good. So I'm a little worried about how the Steelers scheme their blitzes, especially because those nickel blitzes just haven't been effective the last couple weeks. Granted, they've come against AFC North teams, so they've kind of been expecting them, but I don't know. I think I want to see more traditional pass rushes, maybe send linebackers instead. I don't know. I feel like the Steelers are going to be opening themselves up to getting burned by leaving linebackers in coverage if you bring the nickel back instead. And that just doesn't bode well when you've got a guy that's probably not going to go down so easy against a 5'9" cornerback. So I don't know. I wouldn't be blitzing Hilton a whole lot. I'd pick and choose my spots where I do that. Another thing I'm concerned about is quarterback containment. We've seen struggles from the Steelers this year. There's no doubt about that. Going back as far as the first game of the season against Tyrod Taylor, we saw it against Baker Mayfield as well. TJ Watt loves to get upfield, and he just gives so much room to the opposing quarterback to sneak out. We've seen Cam Hayward and Bud Dupree struggle as well. They need to be able to contain this guy because Newton's certainly got the legs to buy his time, and he doesn't love to do it, but he'll do it if he needs to. And the Steelers will certainly give him the opportunity to if they're still not disciplined in their rush lanes. So it's going to be up to those edge guys, and it's going to be up to Hayward and Tuitt to set the edge and contain Cam Newton there and help contain the running game from getting outside. But if they can hold on just long enough, keep bending but not breaking, maybe coming up with a couple of turnovers in this game, it'll go a long way for the Steelers to be able to get ahead and win this game. Special teams is really just a clear and concise advantage for the Panthers. The Steelers ranked 27th in average punt at 42.6 yards per punt, and they're 27th in net average as well with 38 yards per punt. Their struggles in the coverage units have not been good the past couple games, and the Panthers are top 10 in the league in average punt and net average per punt. And then in terms of kick returning, they're averaging almost a whole yard more than the Steelers in kick returns. But the Steelers have been a little better in punt returns. And then obviously you might remember Graham Gano and Chris Boswell both represented their respective conferences in the Pro Bowl last season as kickers, but Gano has far outperformed Boswell. Boswell has struggled all year long. So quite clearly the Panthers have the clear and concise advantage in special teams. And a couple other things to mention. The Steelers' penalties have been huge on special teams this year. They're by far the most penalized unit in football. They need to do better. And they really got to minimize their mistakes here. And then besides that, it's also worth mentioning the Steelers are averaging terrible starting field position this year. Of the 32 teams in the NFL, they rank 30th in starting field position, which is just, that's awful. That can't happen. And the Panthers are 6th in this category. So the Panthers are routinely winning the field position battle, and the Steelers are typically losing it. That's really setting yourself up for failure right here. All right, let's get into the keys of the game. I'll list mine first. For the offense, I think it's just you have to stay balanced. Don't abandon the ground game. The Panthers have the second fewest rushing attempts against this year. We already know they don't have a great pass rush outside of Mario Addison. The Steelers can make the Panthers defense think about the run game, and if they can keep them honest, the Steelers offense should be poised to find favorable matchups all night long. And then on defense, it's just win third down. The Panthers are clearly a new offensive team with Norv Turner. Cam Newton's been rock solid this year. They've struck a nice balance between the run and pass game, and their ground game has opened up so much for them. They're going to use it on Thursday, make no mistake. And they're going to use it to put them in manageable third down situations all night. It's going to be up for the Steelers' defense on third down to get them off the field. If they can keep the Panthers' third down percentage under around 40%, I'd feel pretty good about their chances to win the game. Austin went with Austin on offense went with not turning the football over. That's a good key. The Panthers, that's their one defining characteristic this season. They force turnovers. So if the Steelers can manage to not turn the ball over and not hurt themselves, shoot themselves in the foot that way, that'll really help too. Because again, these teams are kind of evenly matched. If you hurt yourself in this game, it's really going to come back to bite you. And then on defense, Austin mentioned this, wanted to mention this if he was podcasting today, but set the edge. Don't let Cam Newton bounce outside or Christian McCaffrey bounce it outside, because that's where they make their plays too. As far as the X factors go, I went with the interior offensive lineman. I want to make sure Luke Kuechly is blocked in this game. He's fast like C.J. Mosley, but he's powerful like Wesley Woodyard too. The interior offensive linemen have to be prepared to meet him headline with runs up the middle and on the outside when they pull as well, because Kuechly is so fast and he's good at pursuing the ball. He has to be taken care of as well. On defense, I went with John Bostic. Look, the Panthers are going to be running the ball plenty in this one. Bostic has been solid in run defense this year. He faces a unique challenge in both Christian McCaffrey and Cam Newton this week. He needs to be ready for the defense, and he needs to have a good day. As an added bonus, he can be solid as a pass rusher. I feel better about him having a chance to bring down Cam Newton as opposed to someone like Mike Hilton, simply because the size difference is not as much there. Not saying that I think Bostic is a better pass rusher, but I think if I had to choose one of them for this game, I'd prefer Bostic just because of the fact that I don't think Mike Hilton would be able to bring down Cam Newton quick enough, or rather effectively enough, before Newton could throw the football or something like that, or be able to use his legs or whatnot. For Austin, he went with Ben Roethlisberger. You know, turning the football over so oftentimes has to do with the quarterback, and it ties in with his key on offense. Don't turn the football over, so that's what he'll be looking for. And on defense, it's Mike Hilton. He believes that Hilton, unlike I do, that Hilton's going to be quite impactful as a pass rusher, at least he could be. he's seeing potentially a big game from Mike Hilton, kind of similar to the one we saw on Christmas Day last season against the Houston Texans. And look, I mean, I don't see it, but I mean, that's not to say that Hilton is certainly such a unique blitzer. You don't really see someone blitz like that from the nickel position really ever. I mean, he's got that burst kind of like what Troy Polamalu had in his prime as a blitzer, although Polamalu typically didn't blitz as often as Hilton does. When Hilton does it, it's like he's in the backfield before you can blink an eye. So, I mean, I have a hard time believing he's going to be as effective, but I don't want to discount it completely because you also don't need to get sacks to be an effective blitzer, and that's something that Mike Hilton has been good at. Even though he only has, I think, 4 career sacks, that would be deceiving to say that, oh, Mike Hilton has 4 career sacks, he must not be a very good pass rusher. No, that's not true at all. He might be the most effective nickel blitzer in the league this year, really in the league since he came to the Steelers. So certainly something to watch out for. Let's move on to the pick'em section. Starting first with the Lions at the Bears. Chicago 6.5-point favorites at home. Austin took the Bears to cover in this one. The Lions looking rather unimpressive in Minnesota last week. I'm going to take the Lions plus the 6.5 this week. The Lions have typically owned the Bears the last few years, and I think this will be a little bit closer than the line in Vegas seems to indicate. So I'll take the Lions plus 6.5. New Orleans Saints at the Cincinnati Bengals. Update to this line. The Saints are now 5.5-point favorites on the road against the Bengals coming off the bye. I wanted to pick the Bengals because I typically like teams that are coming off the bye, except Marvin Lewis's teams are not good coming off the bye. They are usually bad, actually. So, that defies logic. That usually means, bad things, that your coach isn't doing a good job preparing. But, hey, you know what? The Bengals like him, so go ahead and keep him. And the Saints are going to probably win big. So Austin and I both took to lay the 5.5 points here. The Saints should win relatively big here. If you're a Steelers fan and the Steelers win on Thursday, the Bengals they have a ton of pressure to win this game because then the Steelers are starting to run away with the division. Falcons at Browns. Atlanta getting 4.5 in Cleveland. Austin's going to take the Browns to win. They were able to stay in the game for a little bit against the juggernaut Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know. I think the Browns are a horrible, horrible football team now, and I know they're a lot better than they were before, but I still think they're just an absolute dumpster fire right now, and the Falcons are riding high after going into Washington and beating them. I think the Falcons go in and win rather handily here, so I'll take the Falcons, lay the 4.5 points. New England Patriots at the Tennessee Titans. Both teams coming off victories, a rematch in the playoffs from last season. The Titans were beaten pretty handily in that game. And despite the fact they're home, they're over touchdown underdogs at home, 7.5. New England favored. Oh man, on the road. Austin and I thinking alike here. We're both going to pick the Patriots to win this one, and win it rather handily. They'll cover, lay the 7.5. I'm not sold on the Titans yet. I need to see more than just a win over a rather unimpressive team to believe in them. And then obviously the Patriots have been rolling, so that's really a pretty easy pick, I'm pretty sure. Jaguars at Colts. Two teams heading in opposite directions. The Colts, both teams coming off their bye, by the way, and Indy's getting 2.5 at home. Give me the Colts to win this one and cover the 2.5 points. The Jaguars are a bad football team, and their defense is still solid, but it's looking like last year was really a flash in the pan for them. And the Colts just seem to be getting better. Their offensive line has improved dramatically from what it was a couple years ago. They seem to be heading in the right direction. They probably won't make the playoffs this year, but the Colts have been a better team of late. So I'll take the Colts to cover. And Austin didn't seem to know quite which way he wanted to go, but he was leaning towards the Colts covering in this one. Arizona Cardinals going to Arrowhead to face the Chiefs. Poor Arizona. It's going to be a rough day for them. They're 16.5-point underdogs in KC. Oh, the line might not be enough. Austin and I are both taking the Chiefs to cover here. The Chiefs are just too explosive, and you look at the Cardinals' offense, and they just struggle to get to 300 yards. It's a mismatch. That's literally, you could define that as a mismatch, and I don't see how you could pick the other way, to be honest with you. Bills at Jets. The New York Jets getting 7.5 at home. Austin's going with the Bills to win this one outright. By the way, it is important to mention that Sam Darnold will not be starting this game. He was declared out for this game, so Josh McCown will be getting the start. I'm going to take the Bills plus 7.5. I'm not ready to declare any team led by Nathan Peterman anymore as a team that can win a football game. Certainly not against a solid Jets unit, and I think over a time, a war of attrition, the Jets offense will wear down the Bills defense, and they'll come away with the victory. Washington Redskins, coming off a disappointing loss at home, will now travel to Tampa to take on Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Buccaneers, who are getting 2.5 at home. Austin wants to lay the 2.5 points. He thinks the Buccaneers are going to win this one and win it by more than a field goal or more. I'm going to take the Redskins. I hopped off the bandwagon last week, but I feel better about them this week, even with all those injuries. I think they're kind of underrated, but I think they'll do just enough to keep the Buccaneers in check. I'm not that high on the Buccaneers, like everyone is with Fitzpatrick, it seems. Although it is worth mentioning, it's like they're never out of a football game with Fitzpatrick. So I'm not super confident about that game. Los Angeles Chargers in Oakland to take on the Raiders. The Chargers are 9.5-point favorites on the road. Austin is going to take the Raiders plus the 9.5. Look, the Raiders have been awful. There's certainly no denying that, but it's a divisional game. I'm sure the teams will be hyped to play each other, and they tend to be close anyways, so I can certainly see why Austin went with the plus 9.5, and it's a big spread too. But the Raiders are such a disgusting football team. There's so much bad with them right now. I don't see how they can be able to keep it together against such a good football team in the Chargers, so I'll take the Chargers to win this one in a blowout and lay the 9.5 easily. Dolphins at Packers. Green Bay's getting 9.5 at home. I'm going to take the Dolphins plus the 9.5. I don't think the Packers are that good of a football team, and I think we've seen that over the last few weeks. They just aren't a talented team outside of their quarterback. They might, we saw that at times last year. They were really, really bad with Brett Hundley at quarterback, and they just don't have much beyond Aaron Rodgers. So, I think the Dolphins are getting disrespected a bit here. I think the Packers will win, but it won't be by a large margin. So I'll take the Dolphins plus the 9.5. Austin believes the Packers will cover. I'm sure that has more to do with just how little he thinks of the Dolphins. Maybe I'm wrong in assuming that, but the Dolphins are rather unimpressive as well. So Austin laid the 9.5 points for the Packers. Seattle Seahawks at the LA Rams. This is an interesting game because there are a few things to consider. One, the Seahawks lost to the Rams 33-31 earlier in the season. That was a very close football game, and the Rams did sneak out with the win. But I got the feeling from that game that the Seahawks definitely felt like, all right, we can beat this team, and it showed. The Rams now coming off their first loss of the season. They're going to be home, but you have to think that the Seahawks are going to be coming in with a certain kind of swagger. I don't think it's going to be enough, so I'll take the Seahawks plus a 9.5-point spread because that's a lot. But Austin's going to take them to win. He wanted to clarify it's not a joke. I don't think it is either, and I think that he has certain merits to what he believes in this case. And if you told me the Rams lose to the Seahawks on Sunday, I'd believe you. Sunday Night Football, an NFC East matchup. The Dallas Cowboys, coming off their incredibly disappointing loss to the Titans on Monday Night Football, go to Philadelphia to take on the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Philly is a 6.5-point favorite. Austin and I both think incredibly little of the Cowboys right now, so we'll both take the Eagles, lay the points. Monday Night Football. Oh, man. The Tank Bowl number 2. The New York Giants at the San Francisco 49ers. What an ugly football game this is going to be. I'll take the Giants to win just because they're coming off the bye week. Austin is going to take the 49ers to cover the 2.5-point spread. Nick Mullins making his second career start. Probably going to throw 5 touchdown passes in this game, but hopefully it's not terrible. And then last but not least, Steelers and Panthers on Thursday night. Let's jump into our bold predictions. Mine are that Stephon Tuitt comes up with an interception and another sack, his fourth straight in 4 straight games. Antonio Brown has another big game with 140-plus receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And Chris Boswell rediscovers the ice in his veins as he hits a game-winning field goal as time expires. Austin had a few as well. You think Mike Hilton picks up 2 sacks on the day. Punter Jordan Berry has a higher punting percentage than the punter of the Carolina Panthers, Michael Pallardy. And he believes an offensive lineman scores a touchdown in this game, which I also hope will happen because I'm always a believer in that. And if Mario Addison doesn't play, he believes easily the Panthers won't sack Ben Roethlisberger at all. He doesn't even think it's that bold of a prediction. And now, the final score prediction. Pittsburgh is a 4-point favorite at home on Thursday night. Opened as a 7-point favorite originally. It should be a good game. Both teams are relatively even. I think the Panthers probably win this game if it's in Carolina. But the fact that it's home on a Thursday really makes me think the Steelers are in better position to win this game. I don't have a great feeling about the defense, but I think they'll be able to do enough to win. And I think the Steelers' offense with James Conner is doing just enough to be able to move the ball and to be able to score. I really, really want to see more from James Washington. The Steelers really are they're missing that deep threat. And I know we said that last year too. It was around this time Roethlisberger kind of rediscovered that deep ball. And once he got hitting on it, the offense just jumped to a whole new level and they played so much better. And I truly think the Steelers can get back to that, but Roethlisberger and Washington have to get on the same page here. But I think the Steelers will pull out a close one, as I mentioned, with Boswell rediscovering that kind of killer instinct. I think the Steelers win 31-28, so obviously that means the Panthers plus the 4 points. And I have the Steelers moving to 6-2-1. Austin has the Steelers winning as well by a score of 34-31 with the Panthers plus 4 as well. I would assume that he feels pretty similar to the way I do about this game. It's one of the tougher games the Steelers have had this year, and it's entering a portion where the Steelers are playing some of their toughest football games of the year. Although, let's be honest, the Steelers, of their remaining games, this is probably one of the few games the Steelers could afford losing because it is an out-of-conference game. I'm not saying that you should be okay with it or whatnot, but it's not the end of the world if they lose this game either. But it should be fun. Steelers, Panthers, Cam Newton, Ben Roethlisberger, 2 teams poised for a playoff run, 2 maybe under the radar teams. It should be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Unfortunately, it is a solo episode, so I hope you didn't get too sick of me talking today. And Austin will be back on next week as we recap the Steelers-Panthers game and talk a little bit about Week 10 of the NFL action. If you have any questions about the show, feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website. It'll be listed along with our various social media platforms below in the description. Thank you so much for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a terrific day.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.